Welcome back, folks. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back, folks. Can I just get a thumbs up for audio, if possible? If possible, thumbs up for audio. Great. And here we go. Everything that we build from these 5 will last. Everything that we build from a sound foundation, on a sound foundation, will last. Everything that we build on a sound foundation will last. Teachers in training, I want to encourage you to always begin with the foundation. And so today, I got the magical hat on today. We're closing a chapter. These first 5 lectures represent a foundation. Everything that we build based on these principles will last. Everything that we build based on these principles will last. Personal, professional, our own spiritual practice. We're wrapping up the foundation today, folks. And I'm trying to get back to this screen, Chef. How do I go back to that? Is it in preview?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So welcome back. Here we go. We're jumping in. We are not in this lineage. We do not meditate. We attempt to familiarize ourselves with the nature of reality, a principle, other people, familiar to the point of intimacy, or to what I call the point, or crossing the threshold of quantum proximity. I become so close, so intimate with patience, for example, that I become patience, and or more technically, patience becomes a part of me. I become so familiar, hyper familiar to the point of quantum proximity with patience, for example, at which point patience becomes a part of me. I become so familiar with my spouse, my environment, anything, period, to the point where I feel it as a part of me, and therefore reflexively respond in celebration when it is thriving, or with effort to protect when it is not thriving. I become so familiar with my environment that reflexively I celebrate its joys as my own, and I feel its pain as my own, and I'm motivated to do something about it. Okay, so we're trying on the path to cultivate ourselves, in other words, to become familiar to the point of integrating qualities. Here we go. We are wrapping up again a series on the fundamentals. It doesn't make any sense at all to talk about anything at all except these first, right? This is where we should start, because this is the only place we can start if we want to build a house, if we want to build a life, if we want to build a business, if we want to build a spiritual practice. We must start at the only place that we can start, and that is with the foundation. We can think of these also like fundamentals in athletics, right? Like the greats are masters of the fundamentals. So we're looking at the very, very starting point of the Dharma compass. Where the hell do we want to go? We want to reside in a place where we get 100% return on our investment. We don't want to reside in a place where we waste everything, right? And so that means more specifically, we want to be stationed in a type of mindset, but even more specifically, we want to be stationed in a certain type of view. The way that we view ourselves in the world produces the type of thinking that we have about ourselves, toward ourselves in the world, which results in the actions that we perform. And those actions also, we find ourselves located either in the zone of sustainability or in dissipation based on the actions that we're performing. Okay, that's a very, very basic starting point, folks. All right. This cat is heated when we want to make changes. We get frustrated at ourselves for acting a certain way when in fact we should be more frustrated that we were thinking about things a certain way, and even more frustrated with the fact that we were viewing this magical situation as not magical. Okay. Um, we talked about the we're still in the land of the three principal aspects as, step two. So let's say, sorry, is there incense burning? It's kind of bothering me. Um, so we talked about, if I'm going from the jump, straight up jump, Dharma compass followed by three principal aspects would represent the foundation. We talked about within the three principal aspects, the second, what we're updating as the second or correct view is like the thing. It's like the thing. Again, also on the Dharma compass, view is like the thing, right? And so we can start as early as we can deploy or start practicing flexing the muscle of shared identity view. Everything is related to everything. I am related to everything. Everything is my relative. I am responsible and influencing and influenced by, right? As soon as we can start flexing that muscle, the sooner we can start flexing that muscle, the better, right? So we can even flex that muscle on the Dharma compass, right? The zone of dissipation does not inherently exist. It only comes into existence temporarily as a result of specific actions of body and mind. The zone of sustainability also does not inherently exist. It's caused, right? Again, familiarizing ourselves. We're building a real practice. That's why we're going through each one of these slides so many times. Building a real practice, folks. So another way to think about sustainability or dissipation, when we know what types of actions cause or create dissipation, we're free to avoid it. When we know what types of actions cause or create sustainability, we're free to reside in it. In other words, why is the concept of liberation and freedom directly associated with emptiness, or what we call correct view, or what we call shared identity? Why is liberation and freedom the fruit of understanding emptiness or correct view or shared identity? Because it's causal, right? When we know what types of actions cause dissipation, we're free to avoid that. When we know what types of actions cause sustainability, we're free to reside in it. We're liberated from our silliness when we know what causes our silliness. We're liberated from our anger and resent, etc., when we know what causes it. We're liberated from our nonsense when we know what causes it. We're free to reside inside of purpose, meaning, clarity when we know what causes it. Okay, if the actions of mind and body that create dissipation are absent, dissipation cannot exist. If the actions of mind and body that create sustainability are absent, sustainability cannot exist. Okay, we're riffing. I'm trying to stress this as a central, like that is the central pillar of practice. Okay. I, the yogi baker, can produce cakes at will. You who wishes to enjoy delicious cake, please follow the recipe, right? Again, shout out Atisha. We're digging into now the three principal aspects. Again, we can see why three principal aspects follows Dharma compass, because cause and effect. Again, okay, so I the yogi have practiced just that. You who also seek liberation, you who also seek to be liberated from nonsense, please cultivate yourself in step by step fashion. Here we go. Again, please don't shoot the messenger. We have maximum exposure. We are in a place where we have maximum exposure to varying types of coffee, and it can help us while we're on the path to become familiar with taking breaks to drink coffee. Okay. And so we have maximum exposure. We can literally look at everything. There's like basically no secrets anymore. Every single thing that has been written down about spiritual practice basically can be found, basically, right? And so the challenge is, how do we know what is legitimate and what isn't? Like how do we know what is what anymore? It's just so many things. And so what Atisha is proposing is that if we do not, if our practice is not rooted in or based on the three principal aspects, then we do not actually have a spiritual practice. Okay. Now we could feel offended at that. What do you mean? I can do whatever. We could feel offended at that, or again, we could just use our logic, right? It's like, oh, actually, that does actually kind of make sense, right? I can see why the three principal aspects actually do form the basis of a legit practice by using my own logic and reasoning, right? Point to your hand. Again, this is an opportunity to flex the shared identity muscle. Point to your hand. What do you mean hand? Do you mean skin? Do you mean bone? Do you mean muscle? Etc. Imagine that cat that was heated somehow snuck into your apartment and removed the three principal aspects of all of your shoes from your closet. You might be like, oh, where'd all my shoes go? Right? In other words, how could you have a shoe if there's no laces, sole, and leather? There's no shoe there, right? And so, in other words, if the three principal aspects are absent, there's no practice there. Okay, cool. And we don't take offense to that anymore because we're starting also to see who is valuable to us by the depth of the problem that they're pointing out to us. Okay, yes, we've made this point. We're moving forward. All right, now we're really jumping into the three principal aspects. Folks, here we go. Again, this is all refresher. What we're really trying to do is build a legit practice. So I know that I'm talking a lot, but someone could go step by step. Remember my aim, remember foundation. And now I'm going to touch each one. I'm going to touch the second, going to touch the third, and that represents a real practice. Okay, so we're talking about the traditional definition of the first of the three principal aspects, traditionally known as renunciation. This is not, I'm going to shave my head and join a monastery. This means I want to make a firm determination to be free from my sense of not belonging here. Notice that most places that we go, we don't really feel like we belong there. The tradition is saying that this is an erroneous interpretation of our environment. In contemporary terms, we've called renunciation participation. Again, we want to maximize our engagement in the world as our exercise in spiritual maturity, as the exercise in spiritual maturity, participation to live a life fully dedicated to and undistracted from progressing along the path. And then, opening this up a little bit more, we make the determination to free ourselves from our sense of not belonging. We make a determination to free ourselves of viewing other people as not sacred. We make a determination to free ourselves from viewing this life as not magical. We make a determination to free ourselves from viewing our environment as separate from ourselves, as not connected to ourselves. We make a determination to free ourselves from not being motivated to steward other people, to be invested in their well-being. We make a determination to put an end to the lack of motivation of being invested completely in other people's well-beings. Okay? We're renouncing what it is that we are renouncing is our old habits of viewing other people as anything other than magical and sacred. Okay? We're making a determination to renounce our old habit of viewing our environment as separate from us. All right. Another way to express the first principal aspect, um, the life that we're living is precious. We are endowed with liberty and opportunity. May we make the most of it. This is a precious human life endowed with liberty and opportunity. May we make the most of it. Again, I'm hammering this home because this is the beginning of practice. This commitment is the beginning of practice. And so that's why we need so many slides to just hammer this home. Total determination to eradicate our sense of not belonging. Total determination to eradicate our sense of not belonging. In other words, total commitment to participate. Really specifically how this can be a transformative concept is to, what we're trying to do is embrace what benefits us and discard our harmful or limiting aversions. Notice that there are things that we could do that would benefit us that we have an aversion to. Working more, saving more, going to the gym more, eating more healthily, meditating, familiarizing ourselves more, reading more, studying more, going to the woods more, whatever, being more committed. Notice that we have an aversion to some things that are actually beneficial to us, right? As we go, obviously there become fewer of those. But when we start out, I'm an artist. Why should I get a job or whatever, right? So we're trying to make the total determination to eradicate our sense of not belonging in the form of a commitment to play. Sure, I will do this thing that benefits me and not be averse to it as an activity of play. Okay, here we go. We did something blasphemous. Forgive us. Also, I'm going to try to digest what's going on in the form of drinking coffee. We did something blasphemous. We've talked about whether or not provocation is an indicator that the line is fresh somewhere. All right, so what we did is we switched the third and placed it in the second, with the intention of using it as a means to generate what is traditionally the third, or excuse me, the second. I'm confusing myself. We've repositioned what is traditionally the third principal aspect and placed it in the second position because bodhicitta, which is traditionally the second, bodhicitta is traditionally the second, in other words, bodhicitta is the byproduct. It is an organic, spontaneous byproduct of successful correct view activity. Bodhicitta is the natural, organic, spontaneous byproduct of engaging successfully in shared view or correct view exercise. So that's why we've repositioned them. Now, there are arguments why they're the other way, and I'm happy to talk about that another time, or if there are questions, we can talk about it. But anyway, so traditionally, correct view of emptiness, when we hear the words dependent origination, lack of inherent existence, interrelationality, interdependence, mutual influencing, or co-arising, all of that corresponds to the relationship that we have to the environment, or the relationship that effects have to causes. That's all it means, okay? That there is a relationship between a thing and its cause, and it could not have become a thing without its causes. Okay. As we press down on that, as we become familiar with that, what we realize is that we are related to our environment. We arise within, we depend upon our environment. And therefore, our environment is an essential part of us, an integral part of us. And therefore, why aren't we motivated? Why don't we reflexively celebrate the joys as our own? Why don't we feel the pains as our own? Why aren't we motivated to be maximally invested in the well-being of our environment and its inhabitants? Okay, here we go. So, breaking it down from a contemporary point of view, what we're really talking about then is that we are related to each other. Shared, that's what we call it, shared identity. We're related to each other. Shared identity naturally emerges from the recognition that any environment or object is included within and composed of other objects and environments. The existence of anything only arises from and is dependent upon other objects, environments, and the health of one influences the health of others, obviously. When two people cohabitate, they influence one another's experience. When two people share an apartment or a home or an office, they influence one another's experience of that home or office, etc. Okay. Obviously. All right, so now we're dialing into practice here. Good, I think we're on time. For once, no, not really. I'm actually fairly timely. How do we know that we're practicing shared identity properly? We will feel the effects of it, and that's getting us now into today's topic of bodhicitta. When we discover intellectually, which is the only place that we can first discover our relationship to others, what starts to happen is so let me back up and say, it's not rocket science, but it is science. It's not rocket science, but it is science that first one thing opens called our mind, and the next thing that opens is our heart. Notice that every time that you've felt love, prior to that feeling of love, there was some checklist of things. He makes 6 figures. He's 6 feet tall. Okay, now I'll do the thing, or whatever. Yo, her booty is crazy or something. Okay, now I'll do the thing, right? First, before we open our heart, first there's some evaluation process, some mental process of checking boxes. And once those requirements are met, then our heart opens. Yes? Okay. So by default, or the byproduct of proper analysis or proper interpretation, correct interpretation of our environment, is that our heart will start to open. We will start to become invested in the well-being of our environment and our inhabitants. All right, and just boil it all the way down to the most basic thing. Love. This is the thing, right? Okay. But we can't go from 0 to that. We don't know why we should. Well, I can't go from 0 to that right? I can't go from 0 to maximum investment, engagement in not just some people's well-being, but the entire environment and all of its inhabitants. I can't go from zero to that. That's why we have to start with analysis. Okay. So how do you know that you're analyzing or correctly interpreting your environment or intellectually recognizing that everything is related to everything? How do you know that you're actually doing that practice correctly? You will start to feel the effects of it. Your heart will start to open to other people. And when that happens, you feel what they feel. You experience what they experience. You celebrate, you're invested. I'm invested in your well-being. I celebrate the joys as my own. I feel your pain as my own. So there are degrees of this. There are degrees of success, we could say, in proper analysis or in correct interpretation of environment. There are degrees. First, we start to empathy. We have empathy. First, we have empathy for anyone who is suffering for any reason. Then we think, would I like to do that? No. Let me pray for that person. Let me pray for anyone who is suffering for any reason. That's the second stage. Then we'll realize, oh, well, prayer is not enough, actually. If I'm now since I'm completely invested in the well-being of the beloveds, I need to do more than prayer. I need to act, but specifically, I need to act in a way that is actually going to benefit them. So this is where bodhicitta now comes into play for us. So from a traditional point of view, if I am invested in someone's well-being and I do want to help them through action as well as prayer, well, the actions must actually be helpful, right? Oh, I didn't mean for that to happen, whatever, with all the things that we do. So from a traditional point of view, this is where bodhicitta differs from love, is that I feel the feelings, I feel the intimacy, I feel connected to the beloved. And as I'm feeling that, I'm also aspiring to become a Buddha, an enlightened being, so that I can know exactly what is helpful for them. When I act, I deliver something that works. Okay, so first that begins, as a prayer. And then as we ripen, as our practice matures, we start to feel the feeling of bodhicitta as an emotion like love. It emerges organically and spontaneously through feeling the pain of the beloveds, praying for better circumstances, wishing to be enlightened. All of that is like included within the emotional, surge. Okay, and so now we can think of the stages of that. We could think of them as, the feedback loop of successful analysis or interpretation of environment. These are the feedback loop. But also we can think of them as a practice, right? Let me develop more empathy. Let me scan, let me turn on the news and see all the suffering everywhere, and let me practice feeling empathy for that. Right? And now we could also, let's bring Atisha back into the room. Should we do that just because? Or is there common sense? Is there a common sense basis for doing that? Atisha would say, yes, there are two reasons that there are two common sense reasons why we should develop empathy. The first is through the principle of commonality, and the second is through the principle of radical selfishness. The first reason to practice these stages, right? Or let me also just say again, these This will indicate how ripe, how mature we're becoming. This will indicate how mature we're becoming. When I analyze my environment, what is the feedback that I get? Nothing. Do I get empathy? Do I immediately want to pray? Do I pray for the well-being, but also to become a Buddha so that I can help them? Or do I really feel the feeling? Do I really feel the feeling, the tears, the joy of the beloved, right? And so this is a feedback. This can indicate how mature we're becoming as practitioners. What feedback am I getting on the inside when I analyze the environment? Am I experiencing empathy for anyone who's suffering? Am I immediately wanting to pray for their well-being? In addition to praying, am I aspiring to become enlightened so that I can actually do something that's helpful? Okay. Now, we can think of that as a feedback loop, but this can also become a practice, right? And then again, if we brought Atisha in the room, well, why should I do that? Just because? Or is there a common sense basis for these things as a practice? And yes, I'm bringing in now 2 new principles. We didn't make a slide because this is just spontaneous. This happens. The principle of commonality and the principle of radical selfishness. We did touch this last week. We were kind of rushing. So the principle of commonality is that entity, is the object I'm observing a human being or not? Yes. Am I a human being? Yes. Do I want to suffer? No. Do I think that any human being wants that? No, unless there's some crazy distorted thing, right? But let's just assume that we're all at least at some baseline level of when I wake up, what is that I want to experience in my day? I want to experience the best possible day. Am I a human being? Yes. Do I think that any human being wakes up wanting to experience the best possible day? Yes. And therefore, when I see any human being suffering, let me try to develop empathy for that. I don't want to experience that. I feel the pain. At least I recognize the pain. Okay, so that's the principle of commonality. The principle of radical selfishness would say, in order for me to live my best life, I need that person to be living their best life. And therefore, I'm going to empathize again. Principle of commonality, I'm a human being as well. I don't want to experience that. I'm going to empathize. Principle of radical selfishness. In order for me to live my best life, I need that person to be living their best life, and they're not, and therefore let me empathize. And that is a practice. Step 1, practice. Step 2, practice. Principle of commonality. Is that person a human being? Am I? Do we wake up wanting to suffer? No. Is that person suffering? Yes. Let me pray for that person for a better situation, best possible situation. I also don't want that. Let me pray and just send them good. I'm going to pray and send them good. Now, having empathized, step 2, I'm going to pray and send them good. What is the basis for doing that, Atisha? Well, you're also a human being. And what is the second basis, Atisha? Well, radical selfishness. In order for me to live my best life, I need that person to be living their best life. Let me pray that they may realize that, they may manifest that. And again, we can do the same thing with aspirational bodhicitta as a practice. If you wanted to help someone, would it be necessary to know what is helpful? That's basically what the tradition is saying with bodhicitta, the aspiration to become enlightened. What they're basically saying is that if I once I develop that motive to help someone actively and not just in a prayer, actively, common sense again. If I want to help someone, Would it be necessary to know what is helpful and what isn't helpful? Of course, yes, it would. And so that's why the tradition says when we're there, when we're ready to be invested in action actively through direct engagement, we should take care to not do things that aren't actually helpful. Okay. Okay. Let's move on. Here we go. So we've touched this a little bit already. So traditionally, bodhicitta is basically the wish to become enlightened in order to benefit all beings. And this begins as a prayer, but then as we mature, it becomes an experience. When we see, specifically, it arises out of the observation of unnecessary suffering, and we feel it as our own. And while we're feeling the pain and the love and the heartbreak, we're simultaneously feeling the prayer. So you could think of, and I think we have a slide for this, but just to understand the word, right? We're using a word that wasn't built in English, right? And so it can get passed, or it can get missed easily. The meaning can pass, we can miss the meaning. And so I want to break it down. So think about when you feel love, simultaneously you're praying to become enlightened. That's what it means. I feel love as a result of intimacy, quantum proximity. And while I'm feeling that feeling of love, I'm praying to become an enlightened being at the same time. Okay. So that's technically what it is. Now, the love component, or the triggering of the emotion and emotion simultaneous prayer, the triggering of that happens. It can happen out of, life is amazing, but it first, as we're developing, it happens out of the suffering of my friends and family, right? Okay, so let's break it down in contemporary terms a little bit. So I'm just going to read the screen, but prior to that, I'm going to drink some water. And drink some coffee. Okay, so just kind of reinforcing this, bodhicitta is a Sanskrit word that is traditionally translated as mind of enlightenment. In contemporary terms, bodhicitta is a force that orients us toward complete clarity about our nature, origin, and purpose. And so this kind of ties everything all the way back to the Dharma compass. Like love, bodhicitta emerges spontaneously as a result of feeling deeply connected to and identified with others. Like love, bodhicitta emerges spontaneously as a result of feeling deeply connected to and identified with others. Like love, bodhicitta emerges spontaneously as a result of feeling deeply connected to and identified with others. This feeling wish is primarily triggered through observing our loved ones endure unnecessary pain and suffering. Specifically, where bodhicitta differs from love is that it includes a heartfelt commitment to become capable of bringing maximum benefit to others. Specifically, where bodhicitta differs from love is that it includes a heartfelt commitment to become capable of bringing maximum benefit to others. As the arising of bodhicitta ripens, it compels us to aspire single-mindedly, single-pointedly to realize the truth in a direct and visceral way. So again, this is why, based on that definition, this is why I'm doing something blasphemous and putting bodhicitta, positioning bodhicitta after shared identity, correct view of emptiness, because it emerges out of our sense of connection to our environment and its inhabitants. Okay. So we're calling bodhicitta now contemporary, we're calling this stewardship. Natural emotional response to successful aspirational meditation, the byproduct of studying and practicing the right way. How do you know your practice is working? That's all this is saying, and that's why this is basically the final chapter on the foundation of practice. Right? I want to start a practice. I've never really done this before. How do I know if I'm doing it right? Right? I'm going to get some feedback. So stewardship is the feedback that will indicate we are successfully studying and practicing. Basically, stewardship meaning to what extent, to what degree is the primary objective of my life being helpful to helping other people thrive. So the tradition also calls this cherishing others over cherishing self. 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 How do you know that your practice is working? How do you know that you are practicing a legitimate spiritual tradition or working with a legitimate spiritual tradition? Stewardship will be the byproduct. To what extent is the primary objective of my day serving and benefiting others? What is my index rate? What is my stewardship index rating? What is my stewardship index rating? To what extent is the primary objective of my day serving and benefiting others? To what extent is the primary objective of my day cherishing others over myself? To what extent is the primary objective of my day cherishing others over myself? Now, let's say that we are the crazy magical hat wearing types, and that does become our primary objective. A profound commitment to assist others in maximizing their evolutionary potential. Let's say that I do want to do that. Let's say that I'm the crazy magical hat wearing type of person that is getting the feedback loop of cherishing others over myself, and that I am experiencing day after day my own profound commitment to assist others in maximizing their evolutionary potential. So what the hell am I supposed to do about it at that point, right? Well, subsequently, were that to be going on, I would also realize that if I'm going to have any shot at doing that, I need to maximize my own evolutionary potential. If I'm going to have any shot at assisting others in maximizing their evolutionary potential, I must maximize my own. That's why the tradition says when you experience bodhicitta, you aspire to be enlightened. Again, is it just because Atisha with the common sense bomb says if you're going to have any shot at helping others maximize their evolutionary potential, you need to maximize your own evolutionary potential. That makes sense. If I'm going to have any shot at all at helping others, at actually assisting others, benefiting others, serving others, stewarding others, I need to maximize my own evolutionary potential. And this circles us back to more study, more practice, more commitment, more study, more practice, more commitment, more study, more practice, more commitment. So in other words, what we're really doing with this concept, with the Dharma compass and the three principal aspects, is we're really starting to cook ourselves. Right? We're really, as the alchemists call it, the Athanor, the furnace. This is the thing. This is the type of heat. This is the space and the heat, the pressure that we're cooking ourselves, right? Pressure, heat, transformation, pressure, heat, transformation, pressure, heat, transformation. Dharma compass, three principal aspects: participation, shared identity, stewardship, pressure, heat, transformation. That went faster than I expected, so I'm going to leave it to questions. We'll leave a quick timer for questions. If there are none, that is not a bad thing. So I'm going to just riff on, let me see what we got here. This guy, I think we have this and this, right? Okay, that's it. All right. So, yeah. So first I've identified, let me just recap basically practice. First, I'm going to identify what I want versus what I don't want. I'm going to filter that through what the tradition would say is that, well, in other words, what we don't want is to feel like we don't belong anywhere. And what we do want is to feel that we belong places. We want to feel that we are related to, that we have friends there. We are invited to think about all the different types of aversions that we have to disciplines, growth, etc. And we're invited to reframe our view of those opportunities as our view of those as opportunities to play. This is participation, basically, right? And we can see why we would want to express a certain level of play, meaning perform in a certain way. We can see why we would want to express a high level, a very refined level of play when we analyze and recognize the connection that we have to the environment. Our environment influences us. We can influence our environment. And therefore, it makes sense to play at the highest possible level. Every time that I score points, that helps my team. Every time that I score points, that helps my environment. Every time that I score points, I'm improving the quality of my environment. And because it is my environment, reflexively, I'm improving myself. Every time I score points, I'm improving my environment. And because it is my environment, reflexively, I'm improving myself. Okay. And so that's the practice, right? So Dharma compass, participation, shared identity, stewardship. That is the crucible. That is the crucible that produces transformation. That is the foundation of legitimate or authentic spiritual practice. Okay, closing the chapter. So I want to comment one or two other things here. We were talking about how do you know if someone cares about you? This was kind of came through. Came through recently on one of the daily dharmas. You know, again, Atisha's still hanging with us for about 10 more minutes. And so let's ask Atisha some common sense questions, right? Atisha, now, you know, if we were like, if it's a meme and like me says nothing, Atisha, now speaking, would you rather hang out with people that care about you or that don't care about you? Well, I'd rather hang out with people that care about me. Okay, great. How can you tell, Atisha, now speaking, how can you tell whether or not someone cares about you? Me. I don't know. I never thought about it. Right? Atisha. How can you tell if someone cares about you? Because they're pointing out places that you shouldn't go, right? Don't drive off the cliff. Don't drink bleach, etc. How we were phrasing this is there is a direct relationship between the depth or severity or catastrophic potency of a problem that is pointed out to us and the degree to which someone cares about us. In other words, we can tell who cares about us by the types of problems that they're alerting us to. We can identify, we can recognize the depth of care that someone has for us by the level of severity of the problem that they're alerting us to. Right? And so, who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Why am I here? Maybe it is true that someone alerting us to the problem of having no idea who we are, why we're here, where we've come from, or where we're going is maximum care. Maybe it is true that someone alerting us to the problem of not knowing who we are, why we're here, where we've come from, or where we're going is the expression of maximum care for our well-being. And if that is so, it makes sense to hang out with that person. It makes sense to study with that person. We were also saying that the severity of the problem that is identified is the forerunner of the profundity of the answer or solution that becomes available. And again, this is why Atisha would say it's common sense to try to find the crew, the people, the mentor, the master that alerts us to the biggest possible problem, because the quality of the problem that is identified is a forerunner of the profundity of the solution or answer that becomes available. Happy Sunday, folks. We will see you next week. Sending you the very best. LFG.